into their beer recipes, right? And they're constantly tweaking and tweaking and tweaking their recipes in order to get better quality outcomes, right? Or alternatively, they fall into the trap of thinking that they need bigger or better equipment, or they need to add more hops. But there's some silver bullet that's going to solve, consistency and quality issues that they're having, and it's usually focused on, formulation or equipment, right? But in reality, most of the recipe tweaking, say for dry hopping and say fruit additions and stuff like that, that's done at the wort production, and wort production is a really small part of the brewing process. And so that sort of leads to the thing that has me questioning, what about the rest of the brewing process, And so sadly, much of the big part in between wort production and having beer in pack ready to sell to consumers is often neglected, right? And so you wind up like Sandra Bullock in Bird Box, where you just don't want to look and your eyes are closed and you can't because you don't want to see what's going on. But the other way that I often see brewers is like the underpants gnomes, right? I don't know if you remember as far back as season 2 of South Park, but if you remember the underpants gnomes, they were always like, phase 1, collect underpants. Phase 2, phase 3, profit, right? And which was just really, really weird. And so basically a lot of brewers are like the underpants gnomes, where it's basically phase 1, brew wort. Phase 2, phase 3, beer, right? And it just doesn't cut it these days. The other problem that happens as well that I see, particularly in fast-growing breweries, and there are plenty out there. So basically, if you have issues with regards to unexpected outcomes with your beer, and your troubleshooting relies solely around recipe tweaking and that sort of thing, as you scale, you can't brew every litre or every barrel of product yourself, right? And so you hire an assistant brewer, or you start to hire a pack team or something like that, or sell a team to help you to sort of meet the demands of production. But all of your how-to, and what I mean by that is all the things that make your beer your way, they're all in your head. And it's very difficult to communicate that to another crew member who's working on your production floor, right? And so then what happens is all these new hires that you've got suddenly struggle to make your beer your way. And all of a sudden, as your team grows, your beer is not being made your way. And I can't think of anything more important to myself as a brewer and every other brewer that I meet, is they want their beer made their way. And that's super important, right? And so it can lead to a lot of issues. And brewers often ask, how do I get control of my brewery, right? How do I manage the production quality? If my process is inconsistent, my product will be inconsistent, right? And if your product is inconsistent, then you're going to have problems with brand loyalty, right? And if you have problems with brand loyalty, right? So, for example, if I put a can of beer into a consumer's hand and they pop the lid and it's a gusher, and that's the first time that consumer has tried beer from your brewery, what's that consumer going to think of your beer and your brand? They're not going to think too much of it. And so they might try your beer once, but then they won't try it again, okay? And so if you're trying to operate a growing craft brewery, consistency and repeat sales are the core part of, having a growing business and increasing revenue and all that sort of thing, right? And so that brand loyalty is massively, massively important. But the thing is, right, is that you do have the opportunity to take control of your beer quality. You don't need to tweak recipes, and you certainly don't need to spend any money on expensive new equipment, and you can start today. And I'm going to give you all the tips that you need to start this today, right? Here's 5 principles that will help you to take control of your brewery. So, this is Dan, Eddie, and Govs, right? So Dan, Eddie, and Govs, they're about an hour's drive away from my place here in beautiful Queensland, Australia. and they run a brewing company called Black Hops Brewing. They've got 2 breweries now. They're brewing about 1.5 million litres per year. So that's 10,500 barrels per year. They've just gone through this massive growth spurt. And when they went through this recent massive growth spurt, they've just gotten national distribution into the major supermarkets and a couple of major distributors around the country. And all of a sudden, so Gubsy on the right, he's the brewmaster of Black Hops. And so they started to have all these issues with product consistency. In fact, they had a product recall around Christmas last year. If you check out my YouTube channel, actually, I've actually interviewed them, and you can check out how they actually dealt with that recall. That was basically the time. I've worked with Gubsy in his brewery for several years now, and so we sat down and we talked about how this issue that led to the product recall happened, and he sort of realized there was things missing as his team was growing, and we worked together and we resolved it. And they're absolutely flying at the moment. They're winning awards, and their volumes are scaling just massively at the moment. So it's really good to see. So principle number 1, right, is break down your production into phases, right? And so rather than your brewery being a black box, you've got to define each phase of production for each phase of your production process, right? And so no matter how many brands your brewery produces, most of the beers in a brewery will follow roughly the same process. I'm sure there might be different things with dry hopping times and fruit additions or something in the bright tank or whatever you happen to do. Most beers follow roughly the same process, right? So if A, you're taking the noise out of your production process, and B, you're sort of simplifying it and sort of unveiling all of the decisions that you have to make during the production process, right? And so breaking the production process down into phases really helps you to sort of understand your brewery a little bit better and demystify it, even though you're the head brewer or brewmaster. And so, for example, it varies from brewery to brewery, and I encourage my clients to basically take control of their production phases and make their own. But for instance, a broad generalization is you have wort, you have fermentation, you might have a diacetyl rest, you'll have chill, you'll transfer it to a bright tank, you'll then have it ready to pack, and then you'll release it to market, right? And so these basically form the phases of beer production in, let's call it, my brewery, right? And so principle number 2 is define your beer at each phase, right? And so you got to look just beyond gravity, right? Most brewers, and this is where we come back to the black box, most brewers, they have a recipe, and a recipe is not for beer, it's for wort. And even if they take it to the next step, they'll have a recipe for wort, and they'll have some very basic metrics around wort. And then they have some very basic metrics about what their beer is supposed to look like. But without taking those phases into account, all those other things are missing, right? And so, you need to look at what your beer is supposed to look like at the end of each production phase, okay? And so the things you need to look at is beyond gravity, right? You need to, if you just got to start with what I call the sacred trilogy, right? And the sacred trilogy is temperature, gravity, pH, right? Very, very simple. You don't need expensive equipment for it. Just get yourself a good pH meter, and you're set, right? But maybe the capabilities of your brewery are a lot better, right? So maybe you can do other chemical analytics such as pH, ABV, IBU, color, haze, all those sorts of things that you can measure with a machine. That's chemical analytics. Maybe you've got the capability to do microanalytics. So it might be CFU counts on certain selective media. You might be looking at your yeast and doing yeast cell counts and viability. And maybe you've got some sort of sensory program, and you might be doing VDK testing or true to brand testing or duo trios or all sorts of stuff like that, right? And your definitions of your capabilities and the metrics that you need to look at with your beer at each production phase is going to vary depending upon your capabilities, and that's totally, totally okay, right? Just start somewhere, all right? Principle number 3 is set some actions for your product for the start of each phase, right? So as your beer progresses from one production phase to the next, think about what needs to be done to the beer. Does the tank need a temperature change? Do we need to dry hop the beer? Do we need to start some daily VDK testing? Is there some lab analysis that needs to be done? Is there a fruit addition that needs to happen? Lots of different things that could happen. Is there a report that needs to be generated to be sent to the head brewer so the head brewer or brewmaster can sign off and authorize the beer to sort of proceed further down the production process? And whatever you happen to do at each production phase should be noted. And by setting these actions at the start of the production phase, right, what you're starting to do is you're starting to standardize what needs to happen in the process for each beer as it progresses through your brewery, right? The really good thing about that is it becomes pretty simple, because as soon as you start standardizing what needs to happen and when, your process starts to become more consistent. Therefore, your beer starts to become more consistent, right? But there's one other thing you got to do, right? Is at the end of each production phase, you've got to have a look at what the beer should look like, right? And so, for example, let's say we're during fermentation or something like that, right? And so we want to set some gates in place to sort of say it's basically a point where we stop and we check the beer, right? And so use the chemical, micro, or sensory analytics to sort of guide you as to sort of what needs to happen. Not every analytic needs to be used at the end of every phase. Start simple. Again, just start with temperature, gravity, pH if you've got nothing else, right? It's super simple. And so what you do is you basically set up a list of conditions that the beer needs to meet, right? So let's say I'm during fermentation, right? So let's say I'm doing something, simple beer with some Chico yeast or something like that, right? My one is I get from fermentation, which is the beer's fermenting away at about 20 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. I'm sorry. When the gravity gets to about sort of 5 Plato, right? The next production phase for me is called free rise, right? And so free rise, I do some checks, right? Has the beer gotten down to the 5 Plato mark, or 10, 20 SG if you use the metric system? And you go, yep, cool. How's the temperature looking? Oh, right, it's 20 degrees Celsius. Tick, right? How's the pH? The pH is about 4.3-ish. Great, tick, right? But production's not, manufacturing is not always 100% perfect proposition. And so there are going to be variances. So the next thing you need to do is, when you're setting conditions, is to set tolerances around each of your metrics, right? And that gives you just a little bit of leeway to say, plus, if the temperature's 1 degree Celsius higher, that's cool. If it's 1 degree Celsius, that's also cool. But if we're getting colder or hotter, then that raises a bit of a red flag and we need to sort something out with it, right? And that way you're not setting the bar too high, and sometimes you just got to let nature take its course. But don't set your tolerances too wide, otherwise it just leads, again, back to inconsistency and that sort of thing. So you get to a gate, you make some checks, you go, yep, we're good to proceed, and away you go. But once something has been checked as to whether it meets the conditions to proceed to the next phase of production, right? You then ask yourself, did it pass or was it within tolerances, or did it fail, right? And it becomes a simple yes, no, right? And so basically, if it passes, then you define some actions for moving the product to the next phase, right? Because we've already set actions on the previous phase for the start and end. If it failed, then, and this is the really powerful thing about this, is that it gives you the opportunity to take corrective action before things really get pear-shaped, okay? So before things go really, really peak tong, you've got the opportunity to take corrective action. Let's take a step back. And if your brewery is a black box, you've got wort, and then you've got beer. And then if something's gone wrong somewhere in that black box, by the time you get to beer, it's too late to take corrective action. There's nothing you can do, right? But by sort of having these checks and balances in place all the way through means that if the temperature, for example, gets too hot, you can go, I'll turn the tank down. Fixed, right? And then you don't have higher alcohols and all that sort of stuff winding up in your finished beer. That's a very simple example, but it just gives you an idea as to how that works. And if a product fails, it might be as simple as just wait. So, for example, if you're on VDK rest, if you're waiting for diacetyl to clear up, one of your daily checks might be check it for diacetyl. Has it passed VDK? Yes. Cool. Let's proceed. Has it failed? No. Let's wait another day. Simple. That was a lot to take in a very short amount of time. Feel free to punch a comment in below. If just tell me how you're feeling about all of this so far. I'll try and read all the comments. It's a little bit tricky from where I am. I can see Daniel's written a comment and Edmundo has written a comment as well. How you going, guys? It's good to see you. Thanks, Ryan. So let's talk about the how-to, right? This is something you can use in your brewery today, right? And so basically, this is how I write and how my clients write a go, no-go test, right? So the go, no-go test is the tool that we use at each of the phases of production to sort of say, stop, wait, can we proceed, yes or no, and away we go. And so you can see at the top here, we've got the start of phase action. So it might be note on my whiteboard that the beer needs a daily VDK check. There might be that we define what the set temp of the tank is supposed to be, what's the minimum amount of time that it's supposed to be there, what sort of tests need to happen in order for it to proceed, and then the conditions for which you proceed. And this is the go, no-go test. So for this particular beer, and this is a very, very simple go, no-go test, which is basically a VDK pass. The gravity has been on spec for final gravity for at least 2 days. And if all of those conditions are met, then we go to the go action, which is set tank temp to 0 degrees. And then you'll proceed to the chill phase, which is the next phase in this particular one. If it's a no-go, i.e. it fails, it's basically recheck VDK and gravity daily. So we just go back up to here and we recheck again the next day. And when we're ready, we proceed. It's very, very simple. So what I've just shown you just here is a really, really small part of one of the things that my clients do. And what they do is they write Beer Recipes 2.0, right? And it's one of the 9 accelerators in my system, which is called the Rockstar Brewer system. And what they do is they write beer recipes in a way that's irrespective of the brewery where it's being brewed. So there are no weights or anything like that. Everything's ratios. It's either percentages or, excuse me, grams per liter or pounds per barrel or whatever it is you happen to do. There are no calculations. All the calculations are done separately out in some sort of recipe development tool. So I use Beersmith, and then I transpose everything onto a beer recipe 2.0. And what that does is that gives you a tool that's really useful to stop your beer recipes from skewing off as you tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak. And there's nothing wrong with tweaking beer recipes. But at some point, you're going to tweak and tweak and tweak so far a beer recipe that no longer is what the beer you intended to brew was. And if you skew off too far, then your consumers are also going to go, what's happening with this beer? It's changing. They may not notice it all at once, but you usually get those comments from the consumers, where they usually say, oh, that beer last year was amazing. It's not so good this year. That's the sort of little bits of feedback that I listen to make sure that you keep your beer consistent, right? And so it's a really, really powerful tool. No calculations, no nothing, right? So just strip it out, all the noise, and just write your beer recipe in terms of proportions and process. And so defining all of the go, no-go tests and all of the phases of production. And then one of the things that we do is we write a fit for use and a true to brand description, right? And so because at the end of the day, your beer is your brand. And consumers, even if they're not particularly savvy ones, they know a bad beer when they drink it. They don't know why, but they know a bad beer when they drink it, right? Oh, this is Dave. So Dave's from here in Brisbane. His brewery is about 20 minutes drive from my house. And his company is called Aether Brewing. And Dave had a very similar issue with his recipe scaling, right? So his brewery is about 3 or 4 years old now. And so he was in a little brew pub, and then he moved all of his production to a big 30 barrel system, 30 hectoliter system. And the beers weren't the same, big time. And it was struggling. He was struggling with how he was actually taking these old recipes, transposing them to his big production brewery, and not getting really good outcomes. In particular with Dave, the bitterness was just off the charts. And the reason was he moved from an electric brew house to a big steam one, and things just changed. And so we sat down and we wrote his core range beer recipes to Beer Recipes 2.0. And that gave us the opportunity to sort of stand back and go, well, what are these beers supposed to be? And he'd never done it before, particularly writing something like a true to brand description. And all of a sudden, it became clear in Dave's mind what his beer was supposed to be, but not what his beer was supposed to be. It's not just about the word, right? And so what Dave's gone to do now is earlier this year, Dave won champion medium-sized brewery at the Royal Queensland Food and Wine Show Beer Awards. He's done very, very well in international competitions, the Australian International Beer Awards. And he's absolutely crushing it at the moment. He's very rapidly heading towards 1 million litres a year. And he's a bloody top bloke too, if I do say so myself. So basically, so I've got the Q&A coming up. If you've got a question, feel free to punch it in now. That we're going to deal with the bloody delay and that sort of thing. So these are really unique times with many challenges, right? And so the go, no-go test is a really, really small part of Beer Recipes 2.0, which is a really, really small part of the Rockstar Brewer system, right? And so in the Rockstar Brewer system, there's 9 accelerators that build on your quality, performance, and passion that just make beer fun, make brewing beer fun. And I don't know about you, but that's why I started being a brewer in the first place, because I just wanted to have fun. And that's why a lot of my clients built breweries and started brewing commercial beer in the first place, because they want to have fun. If you don't have those 3 things, if you don't have quality, performance, and passion, you can't have fun, all right? And so I invite you guys to come to a free live crash course that I'm running next week. I'll show you the Rockstar Brewer system. I'll show you how it can help your brewery build its brand loyalty and sales through quality production techniques. So it's about being consistent, high quality product. You will brew award-winning beer if you follow the Rockstar Brewer system. It doesn't matter if you've got, if you're a small brewery or a large brewery, you've got a lab or you don't, you've got one person or you've got many. This system just works. It's proven. To give an example, the competition this year where Dave won champion medium-sized brewery, my clients in this program won champion brew pub, champion small brewery, champion medium brewery, champion large brewery, and another brewery won champion pale ale. So I don't mess around when it comes to my clients making their beer well. Session's free, so leave a comment below. If you just comment go, I will reply back to all the comments and I will get you all the details that you need. We're going to run that early next week, and so I'll send you over where you need to go to come to that live crash course. That'll take about 30 minutes or something like that, probably shorter than this one, I think. So should be good. Be a lot of fun. So thanks heaps for attending today, everybody. What I'll do is I'm just going to stop my screen share because I know I can't get it back. So if you've got a question, feel free to punch it into the chat. I'll hang around for as long as you want. There we go. Oh, there I am. Hi, everybody. So if you've got a question about the go, no go test or something like that, just feel free to leave it in the comment section below. I'm just trying to see if I'm looking at Facebook and YouTube at the same time. And just feel free to just leave a comment there. I'm just trying to see if I can see the comments on YouTube. There we go. There I am. Please don't press play. Please don't play sound. There we go. Okay, cool. So thank you, Ryan. Again, he's stalking me on YouTube as well as Facebook. Awesome. Max, I'll get back to you. Harsha, I'll get back to you. Who else have we got there? Edmundo, mate, I will get back to you shortly with some information about that. So feel free to punch in a question. If you've got a question, great. If you don't, I'm going to have breakfast. So that's absolutely awesome. I'll give you guys another 30 seconds or so just to see if we've got any questions in there and that sort of thing. Let's see what we got. Let's see how we go there. No, doesn't look like we've got any questions. Okay. Thanks very much, everybody, for joining us today. If you want to know more about what I do, check out my YouTube channel. It's Rockstar Brewer. Go to my website, rockstarbrewer.com. All the socials, it's Rockstar Brewer. Leave a comment below, go, and I will get you the information for our live crash course next week. It's totally free, and we'll just have some fun and make some awesome beer. Cheers, guys. Have a good day.